ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् अरुणाचला शिवा अरुणाचला शिवा अरुणाचला शिवा अरुणाचला Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste, dear friends. Now I am giving third video on Arunachala Aksharamanamalai. I start with verse 61. O Arunachala, it is no good tasting an overripe fruit. One should eat a fruit that is in proper ripeness. The devotee soul compares herself to a fruit that is just fit to be eaten. If the Lord delays in coming to her, it will be like the action of a gardener who gathers overripe fruit. In the language of bridal mysticism, the bride is ready for the groom, and this is the right time for her to be enjoyed. If the groom does not come now but delays, he would only meet with bitterness. A love that has lost its warmth cannot be the source of delight. The devotee soul may lose interest in God if he does not respond at the proper time. So, she appeals to him not to lose time but to come to her rescue immediately at just the right time. Verse 62. O Arunachala, hast thou not taken me, giving thyself to me, unimplored? Thou art verily death to me. The devotee soul here sings the praise of the limitless mercy of the Lord. Taking her unto himself, he has given himself unto her. What kind of a barter is this? The soul has nothing to lose and has everything to gain. Saint Manikovacakar, addressing the Lord, says, You have given yourself to me and have taken me instead, O Sankara. Tell me who is wise. I have gained eternal bliss. What have you gained from me? If Antaka is read as Andhaka, the meaning would be you must be blind even without my asking and my deserving. You have taken me and given yourself to me. By taking me, you have destroyed me. Thus, you have become death, Antaka, to me. You have killed my ego without subjecting me to any suffering. Nandidadu. In the process, the death of the ego is a precondition to gaining the life eternal. Verse 63. O Arunachala, save me after taking me fit through look, thought, and physical contact. In verse 61, the devotee soul declared that she was just fit to be enjoyed by the Lord like a fruit which was in proper ripeness. Here in the present verse, she says that even if she were to be regarded as unfit, it is the duty of the Lord to make her fit. It has already been stated that the initiative comes from the Lord, that even the soul's inclination towards God is caused by God. See verse 60 and 62. then clearly God is under an obligation to render the soul fit to receive His grace. Maturation is made possible through spiritual initiation, Diksha. God appears as the master, Guru, and initiates the disciple. Three types of initiation are mentioned through sight, through thought, and through touch. Chaksu Diksha, Bhava Diksha, and Hasta Diksha. The three types are analogous respectively to the modes of hatching the eggs by the fish, the tortoise, and the bird. The fish is said to hatch the eggs by look, the tortoise by thought, and the bird by physical contact. Similarly, the Guru initiates the disciple through sight, contemplation, or touching the disciple's head with his hand, Hastamastaka Samyoga. If the devotee soul is so low that none of the three modes be considered to be enough by itself, then let all the three modes be applied in order that she may be saved. Here, the devotee claims her right to be saved, which involves on the part of God the corresponding duty of saving. Verse 64. Verse 64. O Arunachala, before I perish on account of the poison of Maya, which has gripped me, reaching my head, please shower thy grace on me so that I may seek thy grace. Maya is the root cause of metapsychosis and misery. It is compared to a serpent whose poison is deadly. The comparison is apt because the usual example given in Advaita text of illusion is the rope serpent. Nescience, avidya, is another name for Maya. On account of nescience, the truth remains veiled and the non-truth gets projected. The means for removing nescience is self-knowledge. In order to gain this, God's grace is essential. Hence the devotee soul prays here for grace. Nescience is wealth, wisdom is life. Those who are governed by nescience are spiritually dead. Atma Hanojanaha. Enlightenment leads to the life eternal. Forgetting enlightenment, one has to deserve divine grace. Before I perish on account of Maya, plead the devotee soul, save me through your grace. Verse 65. O Arunachala, do see and grant thy grace so that Maya may be destroyed. If thou dost not see and bestow grace, who in this world could tell thee? God's essence is grace. Bestowal of grace is his inalienable function. Inalienable function. This function must necessarily take place with reference to the devotee soul. If God does not come to the aid of the devotee soul, to whom else could she turn? Who in this world or in any other world is there that can speak to God on behalf of the devotee soul? Even if such a one could be found, why should God be told of what his natural function is? Should anyone tell fire that it should burn? Does a mother require to be told that she should protect and nourish her child? The devotee soul has no doubt at all that God will shower His grace and save her from Maya. Verse 66. O Arunachala, making me get rid of the madness for sense pleasures, thou hast made me directly become mad for thee. Now give me through thy grace the remedy for overcoming this madness. Madness for sense pleasures is what is called lust. Madness for God is what is known as devotion. The technique of getting rid of the former is by replacing it with the latter. God is to be put in the heart where earlier the sense objects had dominated, or rather the flow of the mind should be turned towards God from its course which tends towards sense pleasures. Ishvara Kama, love of God, should take the place of Vishaya Kama, love of sense objects. This is bhakti. Madness for God also implies imperfection in so far as it involves a sense of separateness. It is to be used for the purpose of contracting the madness for sense pleasures, even as a thorn is employed for removing another thorn. But even God madness should be transcended in the sense that the goal of non duality should be gained. The final self realization is the remedy for God madness, and this remedy is to be had through God's grace. Verse 67. O Arunachala, without fear I have sought to reach thee that art fearless. Then why art thou afraid of being united with me? I requires It requires great courage for anyone to leave the lure of sense pleasures and to seek to be united with God. Such a one is the true hero, Dhira. The devotee soul feels happy that she has escaped from the clutches of sense objects and has learned to rely on God as the sole refuge. There can be no fear in God. God is fearless because He is non dual. It is only where there is duality that there can be fear. The devotee soul longs for the realization of non duality, which is fearlessness. God should welcome this. Why then does He hesitate to accept the soul? Does it mean that he is afraid? What reason is there that he should be hesitant? So the devotee soul pleads with the Lord that he should fulfill her longing without delay. The first line may also be rendered thus: frightened by sense objects, I have sought to be united with thee that art fearless. Verse 68. O Arunachala, which is wrong knowledge, say which is right knowledge, and bestow thy grace so that I may attain the latter. Ignorance is not mere absence of knowledge, it is perverted or wrong knowledge. It veils the real self and projects the non real world. Thus, it becomes the root cause of bondage. The removal of ignorance is through right knowledge. Knowledge of the non dual self, it is the immediate experience of the truth that releases the individual from its individuality and enables it to realize its non difference from the self. In order to gain this final goal, the devotee soul prays for God's grace. Even to be able to distinguish between right and wrong knowledge, the guidance of God or Guru is necessary. The venom of error consists in its posing to be truth. In order to unmask error, one has to gain wisdom which results from divine grace. When wisdom is gained, there is no duality any longer, no sorrow. Verse 69. O Arunachala, let this mind which is now attached to the world get attached to the whole and become wedded to the whole. Do bestow thy grace. What occupies the mind in the state of ignorance is the non-real world of which it itself is a part. The world fills the mind, the world is too much with it. It is on account of this that there is misery, endless suffering. The way to remove misery lies in detaching the mind from the world and attaching it to God who is the whole Purna. When the whole occupies the mind in the language of bridal mysticism, when the mind is married to God, the mind gets dissolved and what remains is the non-dual Brahma, bliss experience. Puranamanam, which means plenary marriage or marriage with the plenum, is the consummation of the life divine. It is the same as Advaita Anubhava, non-dual experience. Verse 70. O Arunachala, when I merely thought of thy name, thou didst drag me unto thyself. Who can know thy greatness? The mere thought of Arunachala is believed to be efficacious in releasing the soul from bondage. Ramana, as a young lad, heard the name Arunachala uttered casually by an elderly relative. Without any ostensive reason, he was attracted to Arunachala and he made the epic journey to the sacred hill after reaching which he had no desire to go anywhere. He lived in Arunachala for the rest of his life. Arunachala waits only for a pretext to save the devotee soul. It is enough if she remembers the name and there the Lord comes to claim her. The devotee soul is dragged even without her will, dragged away from worldly attachments and unto the Lord's being. Such is the transcendent greatness of Arunachala. It is beyond measure, beyond description. Verse number 71. O Arunachala, in order that my low, ghostly nature may leave, thou, as the obstinate ghost, hast possessed me and made me behave like a ghost. The ego is the base ghost that possesses the soul. In order that this ghost may be driven away, God must possess the soul. The soul was world made formerly, now it becomes God made. Possession by the evil spirit is displaced by possession by the highest spirit, God. When the soul becomes God possessed, she behaves like a child or a lunatic or one possessed. Bala Anmatta Pisasvat. The devotee soul wonders at the new life that has come to her as a result of God's grace. Here, now madness is an elevating experience. Her new possession is what will save her and make her whole. Those who wallow in worldliness may call her mad, but if this be madness, then madness has value and not sanity. Verse 72. O Arunachala, do protect me like a sporting pole so that I may not wither away like a tender creeper that has no sport. Without a tree or sporting pole, a creeper cannot survive. What gives strength to the creeper and makes it grow is the sporting tree or pole. Similarly, the devotee soul cannot subsist without God. God is her mainstay and sport. So she appeals to God, praying that He should not forsake her. Maya and samsara are powerful forces that create adverse conditions. If the devotee soul should battle against them and succeed, she must have God's constant and unfailing support. Among the analogies for mind's devotion to God given by Sankara in the Sivananda Lahari is that of a creeper and whining a tree. Lata Aksita Trihum. Verse number 73. O Arunachala, stupefying me as if with magic powder, thou hast taken away my intelligence and shown me thy wisdom. The soul's intelligence is in fact no intelligence, it is nescience, it is ignorance posing as knowledge, hence its removal is difficult. Only God's grace can help to remove it. Grace can work wonders like magic powder. The magician strews some wonder powder on the patient. The patient loses his initiative and will and become an instrument in the hands of the magician. He no longer sees with his own eyes, he sees with the eyes of the magician. Similarly, similarly, the Lord who is the greatest magician overpowers the devotee soul with his magic spell, grace, so that the soul may have her ignorance, which is mistaken as intelligence, destroyed. When this is done, God's wisdom, which is the supreme knowledge, is revealed to the soul. Here, there are not the distinctions of seer, seen, sight, and object. This knowledge is not a modification of the mind, it is pure awareness, Chinmatra, which is God, the Self. O Arunachala, in the common space where there is neither going nor coming, show me the battle that is waged by grace. The common space here spoken of is the limitless non-dual reality Brahma. The ether of the heart is a symbol for it. Here there is no bondage, no duality, no birth, no death. It is the region beyond transmigration. Brahma is the infinite, unlimited reality, Bhuman. Since there is no duality there, there is no question of going and coming, birth and death, and all change can belong only to individuals. But there is no individualism in Brahma, which is one only, without a second. Ekam eva advityam. Gaining this Brahma is the goal of life. How is it to be gained? By battling against and conquering plurality with the notion of plurality and its cause, nescience. This battle can be successfully waged only with the help of God's grace. The devotee soul here prays for a sight of this battle royal between the darkness of ignorance and the light of wisdom, the success of the latter assured with the help of divine grace, which is only another name for wisdom. Verse 75. O Arunachala, rid of the attachment to the body made of the elements, let me ever behold thy splendor and be united with it through thy grace. What conditions the soul and makes it limited is its attachment to the body. The body and the mind are products of the elements which constitute the not self. On account of nescience, the soul thinks I am the body is mine. It is this false identification that involves the soul in transmigration. When this false identification is removed, the soul realizes its true being in the non dual reality Brahma. Brahma is Sattva Chitte Ananda, the supreme splendor. The soul is the same splendor apparently imprisoned. When this imprisonment is removed through grace, which is the same as knowledge, the soul realizes the truth of non duality. Verse 76. O Arunachala, when thou dost administer medicine for delusion, why should I continue to be deluded? Be thou resplendent as the gracious heel of medicine. Delusion, ignorance is the cause of bondage. That is the basic malady from which the soul suffers. God administers the cure for this malady. He is himself the physician, Bhisak, and the medicine, Bhesjam. That being so, why should the soul despair? The ultimate reality in the form of the Aruna heel is the supreme medicine for the soul's illness. The mere thought of it will cure the root disease of bondage. Alternative meaning of the words Mela Maram Didani Mala Dabo. Thou who hast the daughter of the mountain Parvati on thy left side, why shouldst thou shrink from administering the medicine that will cure the disease of delusion? Verse 77. O Arunachala, having destroyed the conceit of those who are conceited, thou shinest without conceit. The soul's conceit in the body and the world makes for its bondage. It is the conceit of I and mine placed in the body and the world that constricts the soul and throws it into the tract of transmigration. The way to save the soul is to rid it of its conceit. This is accomplished through God's grace. Freedom from conceit is the mark of limitlessness. God, who is the non-dual reality, has no conceit. It is by realizing the grand identity that one becomes free from conceit. O Arunachala, as I am prescient, I cringe only when overpowered. Without deceiving, bestow thy grace on me. Self-conceit is a consequence of a prescience. The ego gets puffed up and overestimates its importance. Not knowing its importance, it imagines that it is all powerful. When hard experience knocks on its head and humiliates it, the ego cringes and craves for the sake of self preservation. Realizing the worthlessness of the ego, the devotee soul prays to God for the bestowal of His grace so that she may be saved from the gyves of the ego. Verse number 79. O Arunachala, protect me so that I may not flounder like a storm tossed pilotless vessel. The soul is like a vessel on a troubled sea caught in a fierce storm. On the uncharted sea of samsara, the soul drifts without any sense of direction or purpose. The winds of desire carry it whi- whithersoever the blow. The vessel of the soul is without a pilot. In such a condition, it is doomed to destruction. What will save the soul from its doom is God's grace. When God becomes the pilot and His grace the rudder, the soul will not suffer shipwreck. However fierce the storm may be, and however agitated the sea. Verse number 80. O Arunachala, the note of ignorance whose beginning or end cannot be traced. Thou hast to unite like a mother, I cannot untie it by myself. The note of ignorance is the cause of bondage. It is called not because it mixes the true with the untrue and mistakes the one for the other. It is beginningless and endless. Verse 81. O Arunachala, without being as a mirror held before a noseless person, lift me up and embrace me. The devotee soul knows full well her own deficiencies. Let not the Lord humiliate her by showing these up. A face without a nose will be awful to look at. There should be no greater insult to a noseless man than to make him look at the reflection of his own face in a mirror. The Lord cannot behave like a finite individual and distinguish between the beautiful and the ugly, the blemishless and the defective. It is His duty to remove the defects of the soul. There is nothing which His grace cannot accomplish. The devotee soul prays to God that He should embrace and save her. Verse 82. O Arunachala, do bestow thy grace so that we may lie in union on the bed of tender flowers, the mind in the inner sanctuary of the body. This is the language of bridal mysticism. The devotee soul pines for union with the Lord. The location where the union is realized is the heart. The heart should first be made a fit place for receiving the Lord. It is no use inviting Him to a location that is rough and hard. Let the heart be rendered soft and fragrant. Then let the soul entreat the Lord to come in and embrace her. Expressed in the language of Advaita, when nescience, the root obstacle is removed, when the node of the heart is cut, the grand identity is realized. Verse 83. O Arunachala, how is it that by uniting with the meek who belittle themselves all the more, thou hast risen high? True devotees are extremely humble. There is not the least trace of pride in them. The deeper their devotion, the greater becomes their humility. The Lord rushes to the succor of the devotees. He is prepared to go to any length for sustaining and saving them. Thereby is His greatness exhibited. It may be truly said that He is subservient to the devotee, Bhakta Pradhina. His splendor lies in descending from His exalted place and lifting the soul from the slough of sordidness and sorrow. The deeper He descends, the greater is the manifestation of His splendor. In the language of bridal mysticism, the verse could also be taken to mean, Thou hast liaisoned with so many women, and yet thou remainest pure. Verse 84. O Arunachala, removing the darkness of delusion through applying the unguent of thy grace, thou hast truly made me thine. The delusion born of avidya is the blindness of the soul. It is the darkness that veils the truth. The remedy that will remove the blindness is the unguent of the Lord's grace. When the Lord applies this magic ointment, the scales covering the soul's vision fall and the soul is enabled to see the truth. Under the spell of delusion, the soul had imagined that she belonged to the non-self, the anti-God. Now that the delusion has been destroyed through divine grace, She knows the truth that she inalienably belongs to God. Verse number 85. O Arunachala, shaving my head clean, thou didst dance in the open space of my heart. What a wonder! Shaving the head signifies renunciation of ego, shorn of the ego. The heart becomes a fit place for the Lord's manifestation. His dance is the expression of the unexhalable bliss that constitutes his nature. In the Chidakasa, Chidambara, Nataraja performed the dance of joy. One beholds it when one loses oneself. The variant reading Motaya Jittu has also the same meaning, destroying the ego. So long as the ego lasts, there cannot be real happiness. It is when the ego is destroyed that the non dual bliss is realized. Verse number 86. O Arunachala, removing my deluded attachment to sense objects, thou hast made me attached to thee. Yet why hast thou not removed this attachment? It is by a sort of homeopathic treatment that the world disease of the soul is to be remedied. The root of the soul's disease is attachment to sense objects. Attachment to the finite and the fleeting cannot yield real happiness. Under the spell of delusion, the soul imagines that the objects are the sources of its joy and gets attached to them. In order that the soul may be saved from sorrow, it must be detached from the objects. This may be done in several ways, but the surest and safest way is to make the soul attached to God. God love is the potent remedy for curing the malady of lust for objects. For cultivating the love of God, God's grace is absolutely necessary. It is by His grace that He has to be worshipped. The soul's journey to its goal, however, should not stop with the establishment of worshipped relation with God, while the relation with the divine serves to remove the relation with the undivine. It itself cannot be left unsublated. The worshipper worshipped relation sublimates all other relations, and that itself gets transcended in Advaita experience. It is for this state of transcendence that the devotee soul prays in the present verse. Verse 87. O Arunachala, if one be silent without speech like a stone, would this be silence? If external silence were the sine qua non of wisdom, the dumb ones would be the most wise. Nay, the state of perfection would have to be compared to that of a stone. Conscious control of speech is no doubt a valuable discipline, but one should not mistake speechlessness for enlightenment. True silence is stillness of the mind. Here, mental stillness means rendering the mind calm and unperturbed. In fact, genuine silence is the plenary experience called upasanta, the supreme quietude. This is mona in the proper sense of the term. Verse 88. O Arunachala, who was it that threw mud into my mouth and robbed me of my living? This is Ninda Satuti, praise in the guise of blame. The transmigrating soul feasts on the objects of sense. It derives its sustenance from nescience. It imagines poison to be food and seems to thrive on it. God reclaims the soul by turning it away from sense objects and by destroying nescience. The devotee soul praises the saving grace of the Lord. Thro- Throwing mud into the mouth means denying food, and robbing one of one's living means taking away the means of sustenance. The Lord's grace makes ruinous life and false existence impossible. Verse 89. O Arunachala, stupefying my mind without any one knowing it, who was it that ravished me? The Lord is the arch thief of devotee's heart. He comes without being seen by any. Is he not the invisible indweller of all beings? He knows all and no one can know him. He is the knower of all knowing, seer of all seeing. In the state of bondage, the soul is under the spell of the world of plurality. This false charm is overpowered by the superior charm of the Lord's grace. He comes, ever comes silently and stealthily in order to redeem the soul and grant it the joy of divine union. The devotee soul marvels at the limitless mercy of the Lord, his unbounded solicitude for the soul. Verse 90. O Arunachala, as thou art my ravishing Lord, I said all this without taking any offense. Do thou come and make me happy. The devotee soul has been taking liberties with the Lord. She has been cutting jokes, mocking at him, and even scolding him. She now reflects on her conduct and fears she that she might have exceeded her limits. She pleads with the Lord not to get offended and displeased with her behavior. All her extravagance was prompted by love and love alone. She has no grudge against the Lord, whose grace is spontaneous. So she entreats him to come and bless her. If she has used any harsh words, it is to make him come and not to drive him away. In fact, how can he be driven away since he is the inner immortal ruler? Verse 91. O Arunachala, come, we shall enjoy one another in the house of pure space, that is heart ether, where there is neither night nor day. Here in this verse, the devotee soul invites the Lord to come into the house of her heart, which is the fittest place for her to enjoy the bliss of non duality with Him. The heart ether is pure and unsullied, unlike the mind ether and the element ether. The latter two are manifestations of Prakriti Maya. The heart ether is pure consciousness. In it there is neither the mind nor are there ether and other elements. The Tamil Vidu means house and also the state of renunciation or liberation. The heart is the reality where one has been liberated from egoity, etc. It is the state of quiescence where there is no duality. It is the timeless experience where there is no day or night. The devotee soul longs for this experience where she will be one with her Lord. Verse 92. O Arunachala, making me the target, thou hast released the weapon of grace at me and hast devoured me alive. In an Upanishadic text, it is said, Parnava Om is the bow, the self verily is the arrow, and the Brahma is stating to be the target. It has to be hit unerringly, and like the arrows one must become the nature of that. The same truth is implied in the present verse, only the relation is reversed. As the language implied is the language of bridal mysticism, the soul is the target, the arrow is the grace, and the one who takes the aim is the Lord. The hound of heaven comes hunting for prey and will not leave the litter without destroying it completely. But this destruction is what the devotee devoutly wishes for. She is only too willing to offer herself as food to be consumed by God. The consummation of joy lies in the complete annihilation of the ego. Verse 93. O Arunachala, the supreme gain art thou, by accepting me who am without earthly gain or heavenly profit. What hast thou gained? Arunachala, the Godhead is the soul's final goal, Parma Purushartha, the supreme end. Hence, since God has no desire to be fulfilled, he has nothing to gain. He is the self-established, self-luminous, all-full reality. Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there is nothing in the three worlds for me to do, nor is there anything to be attained that has not been attained, yet I continue to work. Chapter 3, verse 22. The work that God does is to save the souls by a shower of His grace. Even the best of souls has come demerit or other. No soul can claim that it has gained all that is desired to gain. The devotee soul realizes her own unworthiness. God has nothing to gain by accepting her. That He has accepted her only shows His abundant mercy. One of the Seva saints, Manika Vachaka, sings, what thou hast given is thyself, and what thou hast gained is myself. O Sankara, of the two of us, who is the knowing one? I have obtained the bliss that knows no end. What hast thou gained from me? Verse 94. O Arunachala, didst thou not ask me to come? I have come. Now thou hast to measure out for my maintenance. If thou should not suffer, it is thy fate. Saving the souls even by force and without their conscious will is what God's grace does. The call of God is there ever for the soul. In the case of the rare soul, there is ready response to this call. The devotee has come to God at his call. He cannot now disown her, saying that she must suffer her lot. Has fate any power as against God's will? God has called the devotee soul, and it should be his lot, even if it is hard to bear her burden. Sri Shankara says in the Shiv Anandalahari, verse 15, addressing the Lord of souls, if thou art not indifferent towards my Lord, why is it that thou dost not destroy the decree of Brahma in regard to me, that makes me turn away from meditating on thee, and that fills me with evil desires? If thou art powerless, how was that head of Brahma, which cannot be plucked with a thumbnail, and which is hard plucked effortlessly by thee without the merest tip of thy thumbnail? In Hindu mythology, the deity that decrees fate is Brahma, the creator. According to legend, Brahma had originally five heads, but Shiva plucked off one of them. The Varaha Purana says that Brahma created Rudra and asked him to protect the world. While doing so, Brahma addressed Rudra as Kapali, a term of insult. Rudra got angry and plucked off Brahma's fifth head with his thumbnail. That only a thumb or the merest tip of it was used for severing the head of Brahma emphasizes the immense power of God Shiva to whom the verse is addressed. God cannot throw the blame on fate and keep quiet, for is he so powerless that he cannot set it right? What can really stand against the might of God? What can fate do as against the grace of God? Sri Krishna has made this promise in Bhagavad Gita. Those people who worship me truly thinking me to be non-different, that is as the non-dual self. For them that are ever united in thought with me, I bear the responsibility of securing what they want and protecting what they have. Chapter 9, verse 22. The following story is illustrative of the truth as taught in this verse. Once upon a time there were two brothers. The elder was given to the practice of penances, the younger was the breadwinner. The younger would bring home everyday provisions and other household articles and give them to his wife. That lady would share the provisions with the wife of the elder brother. The latter would do the cooking, etc., and keep the food ready for noon. When her husband would come back from the riverside where he performed his penances, his wife would serve him with food. He would offer the food to God and then partake of it. Immediately he would return to the river bank to resume his penances. This went on every day for a long time. At long last, the wife of the younger brother was put out at what she considered to be the vegetative and wasteful life of her brother-in-law. She stopped supplying provisions to her sister-in-law. When the austere brother came home that noon, there was no food. Without eating, he repaired to the riverside for his meditations. The same thing happened the next day, but before going back for his devotions, he took out the text of the Bhagavad Gita and opened the page which contained the verse which says that God attends to the welfare of those people who constantly think of Him as non different. He thought that these were not the Lord's words and that the verse should have been interpolated. So he scored it out and went back to the river bank. When he had gone, the Lord Hari went to his home with cartloads of provisions and wealth, delivered them to the lady and disappeared. The lady hurried to the bank of the river, met her husband, and related to him what had happened. The pious man went home, beheld the wondrous doings of the Lord, took out the text of the Bhagavad Gita again, and wrote with his own hand the expunged verse. The lesson of the story is that the sincere aspirant has nothing to be worried about, not even about his subsistence in the body. Dread, anxiety, etc., can have no place in his mind. His is the truly carefree life. His only concern is with his spiritual progress. He should look upon the world, including his body, as the superimposed appearance on the non-dual self. Verse 95. O Arunachala, the day when thou didst say, Come, and I, by thy grace, entered along with thee into the heart, that very day I lost my individual life. This is thy grace. It is when the ego is lost that self is gained, and the gaining of the self is due to the grace of the self. The ego is a mere phantom created by nescience. When this is destroyed, there remains only the resplendent self shining in the heart. The devotee soul pines for union with the Lord, the Supreme Self. When she enters into the heart center with her Lord, her ego gets annihilated completely. She finds herself by losing herself. Separated existence is the cause of misery. When this is realized to be an illusory manifestation, misery disappears and there is the experience of unexhalable bliss. Verse 96. O Arunachala, if I give up thy remembrance at the time of death, I shall have trouble and be born again. Do shower thy grace that I may die without giving up remembering thee. The last thoughts are the most important ones, for it is they that determine the soul's future. Jadabharta had to be born as a deer in spite of his earlier austerities because his last thoughts were centered around the pet deer he had been bringing up. The devotee soul prays that her last thought should be on the Lord. Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, thinking of whatever object one leaves the body at the time of death, that and that alone one attains deeply engrossed in the thought thereof. Chapter 8, verse 6. He who departs from the body thinking of me alone, even at the time of death, attains my state in regard to this. There is no doubt. Chapter 8, verse 5. The last thoughts will depend upon those which one habitually thinks. Therefore, one should always think of God if one's last thoughts should be about God. Verse 97. O Arunachala, dragging me out of my house, the ego, thou hast made me enter into the heart home, and slowly thou hast shown me that itself as thy home, such is thy grace. The ego is the false I. It is this which binds the soul. By God's grace, the devotee is liberated from the constricting bondage forged by egoity. She enters the heaven of the heart ether, which is the house of God, the seat of the true self. The Tamil Vidu means both house and liberation. Verse 98. O Arunachala, I have made public thy doings. Do not hate me for this, but do save me by admitting me into the space that is thine, that is grace. In this hymen, the devotee soul has spoken about the sports that the Lord has played with her. He should not take any offense at this. It is the longing that she has for him that has made her speak in the way she has done. The Lord, in his infinite mercy, should overlook all this and come to save her. Verse 99. O Arunachala, do grant me graciously the essential truth of the Vedas, which shines in the Vedanta as the distinctless, distinctionless reality. Vedanta means the end or goal of the Vedas. It is so called because the purport of the Vedas is taught therein. The purport is that the Supreme Self Brahma is non-dual, one without a second. The distinctions that are experienced in the world and the particulars that constitute it are not real, and they are but apparent. The devotee soul prays that this plenary truth be revealed to her. Brahma is the source of the Vedas. Brahma is to be known from the Vedas. Verse 100. O Arunachala, considering even my slender as praise, take me under the protection of thy grace and do not reject me. In taking liberties with the Lord, the devotee has heard words of blame against him. This is because she has intensive love for her Lord. He has not one who is carried away by the expressed words. He knows the inner intentions. He knows that the devotee's abusive expressions are but praises. He has to save not only those who speak sweetly of him, but also those who say harsh things about him. Are there not cases of saints who hurled stones at him or beat him without a bow, club, or stick? The first three words of this verse may also be taken to mean blessing me by placing thy hand on my head. Verse 101. O Arunachala, as snow in water, dissolve me as love in thy form, which is love, thus be gracious. Snow and water are not different from each other, only in appearance do they differ. When snow melts, it becomes water. The soul and Brahma are not different. It is the adjunct of the soul's nescience that makes for the apparent difference. When nescience is destroyed through knowledge, the truth of non-duality is realized. An Upanishadic text compares release moksha to milk being poured with milk or water with water. There is no difference between milk that is poured and milk that is poured with, between water that is poured and the water that is poured with it. It is all milk, all water. The nature of the self is pure love, happiness, bliss. The things that we imagine we love do but reflect a fragrance of the love that is the self. The sage Yajanvalkya says to Maitreyi in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, not for the sake of the husband is the husband dear, but for the sake of thyself is the dear. Not for the sake of the wife is the wife dear, but for the sake of the self is the she dear. Not for the sake of all is all dear, but for the sake of the self is all dear. The self is the seat of happiness. It is love itself. In the present verse, the devotee soul prays for the dissolution of her separate individuality so that she may realize her true nature as the non-dual love. So I stop the video here. Thank you for watching and listening this video. Please subscribe my channel. Thank you, my dear friend. Thank you. Arunachala Siva, Arunachala Siva, Arunachala Siva, Arunachala. Verse 102. O Arunachala, the moment I thought of thee as Arunachala, I got caught in the net of thy grace. Will the net of thy grace ever fail one that is caught in it? The ark fisherman that Lord Arunachala is, he cast his net of grace in order that the souls may fall into it. The very moment the devotee soul thinks of Arunachala, he falls a prey to it, his grace. The net is so strong that no escape is possible for those who have found their way into it. The devotee soul does not wish to escape from it. In the case of the physical net and the fish, the latter loses its freedom when it is caught, but in the case of the devotee soul, she finds her real freedom when she comes into the ambit of divine grace. Verse 103. O Arunachala, thinking of thee as I got caught in thy grace, thou didst bind me like a spider, imprison me and eat me up. The analogy of the spider and its web is implied here. The spider weaves the web out of its own bowels, waits for the insects to get caught in the web, runs towards these victims, and swallows them. Arunachala, the supreme god, had spread his web of grace so that the devotees could be saved. Being swallowed up by God means destruction of the ego through enlightenment and grace. The devotee soul realizes her identity with or non-difference from the Supreme Reality when this happens. Verse 104. O Arunachala, do grant me the gift of becoming the lover of thy lovers who hear thy names with love. There is no difference between the Lord Arunachala and his name. There is no difference either between the Lord and his devotee. Service to the devotee is service to the Lord. Hence, many a devotee has prayed to the Lord that he or she may be given the privilege of serving the Lord's devotees. Saint the human verse says, if I am trained to serve the devotees, the state of bliss will come to me of its own accord. A verse of Saint Apars gives a moving account of the devotee's God madness thus. At first she heard his name. She heard about his form and complexion. Then she heard about his beloved place of residence. As a result of she became mad about him. That very day she left her mother and father. She gave up the practice of the world at large. She forgot herself. She lost her name. The maid placed her head at the feet of her Lord. Verse 105. O Arunachala, protecting the helpless persons like me, so that they may be happy, mayest thou live forever. Arunachala is the helper of the helpless. He comes to the succor of those who are in distress. Saviorship is his very nature. He cannot but save his devotees and eventually all souls. The devotee soul prays that all should be saved. There is no room for selfishness in devotion, and knowledge seeking release is not a selfish pursuit. When one is truly devoted to God, it rebounds to the good of the entire world. There is the following universal prayer. Let all be happy here. Let all be free from disease. Let all see things that are auspicious. Let no one have misery as his lot. Verse number 106. O Arunachala, be gracious so that thy ears which hear sweet songs of those devotees whose very bones melt with love may accept also my poor strains. Out of innate humility and modesty, the devotee soul describes her strength as poor as compared with the fine poetry of the psalmist like Saint Vachakar. In fact, all speech comes from the Lord. No one can utter any sound without His grace. He is the speech of speech and primal word. Without His grace, we cannot praise Him even in the concluding verse of the Saundriya Lahari. Acharya Shankara prays to the universal mother thus, O mother of speech, the composing of this hymen of praise and address to thee couched in words that are thine is just like worshipping the sun by waving a row of blazing lights, like trying to please the moon with offering water drops that drip from a moonstone and satisfying the ocean by pouring its own water into it. Verse number 107. O Arunachala, hill of patience, bear with my poor strains, considering them to be good poetry, and thou gracious, thy will be done. To go wrong in human, to grant pardon is divine. The devotee soul prays that the defects in her hymen of praise should be overlooked and the devotion that inspired it should be accepted. Any attempt to praise the Lord is bound to fail. He is beyond the reach of the words and thoughts. The devotee soul cannot but praise him, but she does not ever hope to find words that are adequate. The devotee soul has no will of her own. It is the Lord's will that moves the world, and the devotee knows this. Saint Manikavaskar sings thus: what is to be desired for? Thou knowest best. It is thou that dost grant what is desired for. To Brahma and Vishnu who desire thee, thou art rare to obtain, but thy own volition. Thou didst assume lordship over me. Therefore, whatever be thy pleasure, do that thou graciously. I seek the same. But if there should remain in me any trace of a trait, desiring something of my own volition, is not that to thy sweet will. Verse 108. O Arunachala, thy ravishing Lord, granting me that love profuse, graciously adorn thyself with this garland of mine. The love liberty is concluded in this verse. The devotee soul prays for the intensification of divine love in her heart and asks the Lord to accept her bridal garland of letters. Long live Arunachala, long live the devotee, long live this bridal garland of letters. So here ends the video. Thank you for watching, listening this video. Thank you, my dear friends. Please, please subscribe my channel. Thank you a lot. Thank you. Om, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Arunachala Siva, Arunachala Siva, Arunachala Siva, Arunachala. Thank you.